Hello and welcome to the show. I am Joe Tophat. Well, folks, I had finally seen the DuckTales Reboot. Yep, the one that I had been building up to with all my DuckTales character profiles and my top 10 best episodes of the original series. So, was it worth all the hype? Yes, it was. It was amazing. I loved from start to finish. Well, okay, I'll get into details. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend watching it. But I will go into spoilers, so again, if you haven't seen it, just stop this video and go find it. They're doing it live on stream on the internet as we speak. Okay, with that out of the way, the whole thing begins where Donald is on his houseboat. I like the idea of him living on a boat. I mean, goes with him being a sailor, but anyway. And he's getting ready for a job interview, but they never say who he's getting a job with. This is important. And I love how, like, Huey, Dewey, and Louie are trying to get him off the boat because they want to take it and go on adventures. They're such little kids. And I even like how they referenced his original suit, the one in blue that we see in the animated cartoons. And, well, problem is that Donald can't get a babysitter to look after his nephews. So he has to do the thing he didn't really want to do, and that's have Scrooge McDuck look after them. In a lot of ways, this is similar to what we saw in the original series, where the pilot episode of the original series had it that Donald had joined the Navy, and he had to let Scrooge look after Huey, Dewey, and Louie while he's away. But, again, in that series, Donald was never meant to be a major character. So they sent him off to the Navy in the original series. But here, I like it that Scrooge has to watch the nephews, but only as a babysitter and not as somebody who has to take care of them full time. And like Don Rosa's Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, they had it that Scrooge and Donald hadn't spoken to each other for, I think it was 10 years. And I love how when they meet for the first time in that length of time, you could just feel the hostility towards these characters. The original series, Donald had no hostility towards his uncle. It was, Uncle Scrooge, I need you to look after my boys while I'm in the Navy. But here, they just downright hate each other. They don't explore at any point why they had this falling out. But it was kind of nice to see that Donald was just having him look after his nephews while he goes on this job interview. And it was also really funny seeing that Launchpad is his chauffeur, and he's always saying, "I'm also a pilot, Mr. McDuck." But Scrooge, for whatever reason, he never pays attention to him telling him that he's a pilot. What reason he does that, I don't know. But anyway, So Scrooge looks after the nephews, and I love all the Easter eggs you see in the mansion. You see, the various paintings on his walls that are very reminiscent of Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. If you haven't read that graphic novel yet, check it out. And there was even a lot of references to the original series, because they had a part where, fast forwarding real quick, where they meet Webby Vanderquack, who's way different from she was in the original series. Because here they have it that Mrs. Beakley has worked for Scrooge for a number of years, and she's gotten pretty bulked up, I have to say. The original series, she was fat, but here, she looks like she could have been a pro wrestler or a bodybuilder or something like that. And even though Scrooge treats her like a secretary, throughout the whole thing, she reminds Scrooge that she isn't his secretary. And she's basically Duckworth in this episode. Or, I should say, in this series. I kind of miss Duckworth, to be honest with you. I understand that Mrs. Beakley is given more to do, and that she has Duckworth's responsibilities, and Launchpad, he's a limo driver. There's a lot of speculation going back to Donald's interview that the one dog that's sitting to the far left of Donald is supposed to be Duckworth. Is he? I don't know. It hasn't been confirmed or denied, so whatever. And well, anyway, like, we find out from Webby that Donald and Scrooge had went on many adventures together. And this is where she shows them this museum, which is really Scrooge's garage. That you see Armstrong from the original series, the big coin thing from the pilot of the original series, and you even see the lamp from the movie, which that's good references. And they don't believe Webby that their Uncle Donald was his grand adventurer, because here Donald treats them with kid gloves. I mean, he's very overprotective. And they also have it where Scrooge takes them to find the lost treasure of Atlantis, and from there, with Launchpad, they try to get the jewels. And the funny thing is that Scrooge doesn't even remember their names, because at one point he called Dewey Sonny Jim. And even Launchpad can't remember their names, because there was one part where he's like, "Oh, thanks, kid I just met." I don't believe they ever did that in the original series, but it's hilarious. And Webby also has one thing in common with the boys, is that Mrs. Beakley is also very overprotective of her. And like the boys, she's very adventurous and not all cutesy like she was in the original. I thought that was pretty clever, where there was a strong connection with these characters. Because the original series, the boys almost never wanted anything to do with Webby. It's like, she's a girl, we don't want her with us. But she has proven time and time again in the original that she was worthy of being an adventurer, even though a lot of fans, even today, never liked her. I always liked Webby, but I'm in the minority on that. But I like how while she was on this adventure to Atlantis, that whenever Mrs. Beakley would call her up, she would do a horrible job at lying to her. I mean, she would make up some of the craziest things ever. And back to Donald, what they didn't reveal beforehand is who is he trying to get a job with. And it is, in fact, Glom Gold. I couldn't believe it when I saw that Glom Gold was the one he's trying to get a job with. I mean, he must really have a bad relationship with Scrooge if he was willing to go to work for Glom Gold. And I don't really like how fat they have Glom Gold, because he's supposed to look like Scrooge McDuck with, different clothes. And also the full beard. And this, he's just too fat for my liking. And I also love how Glom Gold seems to really like Donald. I mean, he was impressed by him from the get-go, and I love how they play up his Scottishness. I mean, yeah, in the comics, as I've talked about in my DuckTales character profile videos, that he was supposed to have been from South Africa, but the original DuckTales made him from Scotland, and they never mentioned that he's really from South Africa in this episode, but they play it up big time, him being from Scotland, that he's like, I am more Scottish than Scrooge. I wear a kilt. And he has his employees wear the tam o' shanters, and he has folks playing bagpipes surrounding him. My God, he's so milking the Scottish heritage thing. But the reason why Glom Gold had hired Donald was because of his connection to Scrooge, and he wants, like Scrooge, to find the lost treasure of Atlantis. And this is where Donald finds out that the boys are with Scrooge on this adventure, and he's so angry about it that he says, I'm going to kill them. Now, of course he doesn't mean this, but Glom Gold overhears this and says, I'm thinking ahead, laddie. Then we'll go and kill him afterwards. I love the way you think. And Donald was so horrified by that. And anyway, the whole adventure was meant to have Scrooge learn to reconnect with his family, because he had never met the nephews before. They just heard stuff about him from their Uncle Donald. And it really showed that, like in Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, that Scrooge had basically became like a recluse. And anyway, they have this big battle between Scrooge and Glom Gold when they were trying to get the treasure, and Glom Gold was able to grab a jewel he thought was the most valuable part of the treasure and left Scrooge and them to drown. And yeah, he backstabbed Donald in the process. But in the end, Scrooge won out because the real valuable jewel was way up high. And I love how that this episode was meant to have Scrooge reconnect with Donald and also develop a connection with Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And I also liked how Mrs. Beakley knew from the get-go that Webby had been lying to her throughout the entire episode. It shows she's really no dummy. And both her and Donald seem to learn that it's not cool to be overprotective. And as for, like, the big talk about, like, Darkwing Duck being a part of this series, possibly, in the beginning, like, Scrooge did mention St. Canard, where that's where Darkwing Duck is from. But so I was expecting that. But the thing I didn't suspect was beforehand he mentioned Spoonerville. That's where Goofy and Pete lived in Goof Troop. So, are we going to see Goofy in this series? It would be pretty neat. Maybe it was just meant to be a reference and that we'll never see Goofy in the show, like how we never saw him in the original series. But I actually would kind of like to see Goofy. And even Mickey, if they can work him in the show. And there's also one final thing I want to touch upon that I did not see coming a mile away. Remember that painting I mentioned that showed Donald and Scrooge on an adventure together? Well, there was part of the painting was torn like this, and when one of the nephews smoothed it out, he just looked so shocked and he said, "Mom?" I have to admit, that was another thing I didn't see coming. None of the original cartoons had ever referenced Scrooge, with the exception of the first appearance of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, the nephews as parents. And so, are they going to explore Donald's sister? I actually would kind of like to see that. And also earlier in the episode, they had, like, Webby was this expert on the Duck family tree, and she mentioned Scrooge's sister Hortense, who is Donald's mom, and his father Quackmore. There was no reference whether or not those two are still alive in this series, but I actually think it would be kind of neat, since they're working on family so much, that maybe for one episode they talk about maybe Huey, Dewey, and Louie's parents are dead. That's why they live with their uncle. Because maybe it's leading to that Donald's sister, Dumbella or Della or whatever they're going to call her, had been a part of their adventures, and maybe the reason why Donald and Scrooge had such hostility towards each other is maybe, this is going to get pretty deep, but maybe she died on one of their adventures and they just blame one another for her death. We're not going to know the answer right away because the next episode is going to be in September 23rd. Why so long? I don't know. So, I thought it was really funny and a great tribute to the original series, and the only things I didn't like is, as I've mentioned before, Glom Gold's weight problem, and I also kind of wish they would have went with different actors for Huey, Dewey, and Louie because they just sounded too old. I mean, Yeah, I know Reese Taylor was not a kid when she voiced them, but she was able to make them sound young. And maybe they could have aged those three a little like they did on Quack Pack. But, yeah, other than that, it was well worth the wait. And even if it was complete crap, I had been rewatching the original DuckTales, and it made me revisit the show, and I'm sure it made you all revisit it and read the Carl Barks comics with Don Rosa. So, any excuse to celebrate the classic DuckTales is a good one, but luckily it was worth the hype. That's all I have to say about it. So, I'm sorry this isn't my typical reviews that I usually do, but I want to thank every one of you again for watching and liking my DuckTales character profiles. I really appreciated all the thumbs up I've gotten in the comments, and I appreciate the criticisms that I got. And I've also appeared in Jaime Tude's tribute video where he sings the DuckTales theme. If you haven't checked it out, there's a link in the description box. And next week, I'm going to do something non-DuckTales related because, well, counting this video and even the one that Jaime 2 did, which I appeared in with other YouTubers, that I've done 12 videos of DuckTales this month alone, so I'm going to lay off that series for a while. But thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section what you guys thinking. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later.